Hey guys, welcome back to Tech Insights with Dylan White. So I'm gonna give you guys a quick update on the week in review, right? And then what's ahead for this week. So once for anybody watching from anywhere else in the world, you might know it's the 4th of July coming up, so super excited. Just have a little extra time. There will be some big life changes for me towards the end of the week, so I actually won't be recording as much towards the end of this week, but also going into next week, I'll probably do mostly more just blog uploads into the Medium and just loading up on LinkedIn, not doing necessarily any more videos. There'll be updates later this week on why that is. We're super excited about that. Also planning on doing some internal documentation of what is a sales engineer, what we do for processes, and just internal documentation like that. Also working on just a little side project for helping other people become sales engineers, understanding the process, the mindset, the storytelling. And then internally for work, just try and keep up. And then, of course, we have the 30-day march towards the SC 900 and helping individuals get their head start into cybersecurity. Again, this is day 2, so just super excited about module 2 in this Security 101 journey. So super excited. Let's get to it. Hope you guys have a great week. Enjoy 4th of July. Enjoy your week wherever you are in the world. And if you like the content, love a like and subscribe. Thanks. All right, guys, welcome back to Tech Insights with day 2. We're jumping right into day 2 of the security journey. We're on the security basics, which we're starting with the Microsoft Security 101 overview. Yesterday, we walked through the overview of the actual entire program and we walked into Module 1, which discovered all the basics and concepts of cybersecurity and the generalities. Today, we're diving into Module 2 and Module 3, which covers identity and networking, 2 key features and modules of security that go hand in hand. And lots of us sometimes will blame networking or blame identity. We're here to kind of decipher and debunk those myths. So let's get in it. Excited to have you guys. All right, guys, we're here at Module 2. We're in the first section of Module 2, which is all about identity. If you missed the basic concepts, make sure you go back and watch that video down below. But here we are. We're going to walk through what is identity, what do we mean by identity access management, or you'll hear it in the community as IAM, right? I am analyst, I am engineer, all means identity. And what we do is we talk about also the principle of least privilege, the segregation of duties, right? And what is authentication or authorization, 2 differences. Right, and so what do we mean by IAM, right? It's a set of processes, technologies, and policies that are implemented to ensure that the right individuals have the appropriate access to resources within an organization's digital environment, right? It's all about managing users, employees, identities, access to systems, apps, data, networking. But identity doesn't have to be a person. It can also be a process. There's all kinds of different ways. So we talk about that. We'll dive deep down that rabbit hole in another section, not the basics. But what's the principle of least privilege? Easy, right? It's a fundamental concept that advocates for granting users access in systems only to the minimum privileges necessary to perform their intended task, right? So what does a person need to minimally do their job, right? That's why we start talking about privilege and identity management, privilege access management. All those concepts start coming because of this principle of least privilege. Segregation of duties, right? Super important, right? Just because I have the ability to be a global administrator, right? I'm not always that, right? I'm more than that, right? Or I'm not that administrating those functions, right? So it's the principle, right, of preventing conflicts of interest and reducing the risk of fraud in areas by distributing critical tasks and responsibilities among different individuals within an organization, right? Even me, just personally separating those things, right? But think about this, right? As an IAM administrator, should I also be maybe a security policy? Maybe should I be part of the red team, right? Should I have those other duties? I'm doing everything. You should not, right? Some teams just don't have that capability due to budgets and funding, right? We're all seeing that dwindle, but the larger the team, the more spread out those duties should be, right? And what is authentication authorization? It's very, very straightforward. Once you hear it once, you're like, oh, that makes a ton of sense, right? Authentication is the process of verifying who, right, the user system, right, is, right, or entity, right, who the thing is, right? You verify and make sure that person is, right? And you should always do it by either something right, passwords, or what other super secret knowledge, right? Something you have, MFA, right, or something you are, right, like a fingerprint, eye scan, right, Face ID, everybody loves that. So, right, those are all authentication mechanisms, right? Authorization, the process of granting or denying specific permissions and privileges to authenticated users or entities, right? So think of it back, I just said the concept of privileged access management, right? So I'm going to request access to maybe go make an administrative change in M365, right? I don't have that all the time, and I shouldn't have that all the time. So I need to go request access, right? That's authorization to go do that part. Right? And here's a whole bunch of links. You'll see them all below. But that is the basics of IAM, right? Very basic. So we're going to jump quickly over into what is IAM Zero Trust. Right? So we talked about Zero Trust yesterday. We dove really deep into just the very basics, right? How I love talking about those pillars and why it came moving from traditional into modular, right? But what is IAM Zero Trust? It's going back to that fundamental, right? We have now moved from having, our network be typically on premises, right? And being that boundary and trusted there. So now our boundary is the identity, right? And how is it different from traditional, right? Began talking and adding on to that. And how is identity used to implement that zero trust, right? And why, right? All those things kind of talk about it, but a lot of it comes into we went remote, right? We went to cloud and hybrid. I'm thinking about this. Every single business that was traditionally only able to work via at home at work, right? So think about banks, think about, lots of global, we call them typical, what you always see as an on-premise organization, right? So energy, right? Things where you couldn't do your job unless you're at the office. Most of those businesses were still at the office, even if the person could, hey, log in after 6 o'clock, right? You could go home, take your job home. Those businesses still required you to come in, right? COVID happened, right? 2020, we all remember that we're working at those times. That concept completely eroded. Right? So if you were to do your work, if you were to be in an accounting, you couldn't do your job in the office, right? You couldn't go in the office for 2 months almost. So everybody had to make a rapid move away from on-premises architecture, right? Extend VPNs, making things easier, right? We're realizing, VPNs after a certain amount of time, just you gotta be back in the office. So it just really expedited, right? Expedited those efforts. The threat landscape, right? It's always changing, data centric, right? You get more data from your identity. And how does it differ, right? So just quick walking through, right? Focus, right? Instead of being at the perimeter, it's an identity verification. Instead of being location dependent, it's location independent, right? We don't care if you're at Starbucks. Trust assumption, we used to assume the trust, right? Once you were in the building, you assumed everybody was good, right? Terrible approach when you think about it. Zero trust, and trust nothing, right? Device consideration, right? Before it was device diversity, right? Assume devices within the network perimeter, right? Once again, if you're inside, you don't care, right? You're on the network, who cares? Device awareness, everything matters, right? Whether I'm on my phone, whether I'm on my computer, all those things get taken into account. Data protection, right? Securing the network perimeters was that focus in the traditional architecture. Now it's all about the data, right? Data-centric focus on controlling data devices based on who you are, right? And what the data sensitivity is, right? And how is it used to implement, right? It's legitimately, we are now focused on modern identity controls, such as every user, device, application, and service seeking access to resources must be thoroughly identified and authenticated before access is granted. Think about for single sign-on purposes, right? That application has to tell the identity provider who it is, right? Constantly keep that token, and if the application changes, it has to re-authenticate as well. They have to re-grant that control. So it's super important to understand those basics. Again, you'll have more links down below. Just understanding the basics, right? Even from the Cloud Security Alliance all the way to essentials, right? So super awesome resource to get. All right, so let's quickly jump into the capabilities of IAM. Right, we're not gonna watch the video, but we're gonna walk through, right, quickly. What's a directory service, right? What kind of capabilities can you use to secure identities, right? We talked a little bit about multi-factor authentication, right? We've all done MFA prompts for probably the last, as long as you've been on the phone, you've done MFA prompts. It just recently moved to every business now. Also uses them internally, right? They're still, if you haven't implemented MFA, we have a problem, right? Like that should be the method. Single sign-on, more companies are adopting that as well as the standard, right? Role-based access control has been around for decades, but now we're implementing it, right? Adaptive authentication is newer post-COVID era, right? A lot of things I'll call pre-COVID and post-COVID. You'll just hear me talk about that for a while, right? So adaptive authentication, we talked about that a bit, right? So if I take my laptop from my home network and then move to, say, not a Starbucks, maybe I go to WeWork. It's my first time ever at a WeWork. It should re-authenticate me, right? Re-request my MFA prompts, re-request all this stuff. Right? And then biometric authentication, right? A lot of us have had Face ID on our phones. A lot of us have had all kinds of different things, right? We've had Face ID, we've had Face ID on your computer with Cortana back in the day. But now we're bringing that to things like Windows Hello. Other controls are bringing it to like Okta, right? All these different places are now implementing biometric controls, right? Macs, they've had it for forever too, right? Face ID again. Um, Privileged access management. I talked about that a bit already, so I'm not going to beat that horse again. Identity governance and administration. Crazy growth in this field, right? I think there's going to be more and more different businesses that focus their entire business model on helping companies and organizations streamline identity services. Behavior analysis, right? It's a huge, huge market out there for behavior analytics, right? It's how who a person is, who a user is, who a service is. If there any changes, flag it, report it, have the SOC alert on it, right? It's super important. So what is a directory service, right? Directory service is a database that stores and manages information about network resources, including users, groups, devices, applications, and other objects, right? Some key functions: user authentication, user authorization, group management, password policies, single sign-on, centralized user management with auditing and logging. That's the basics, right? When we talk about providers, identity providers, typical ones you'll hear are Active Directory, right? Almost every organization created pre-COVID, or not generated in the cloud back when the cloud boom first happened back in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, 2010 area. Um, we'll have Active Directory, right? And then you'll have what's called Azure AD, right? That came around in 2013, 2014. And then you'll have now called Entra ID. But then you also have providers such as Okta, Okta Zero, Ping Identity, SailPoint, right? You have all hosts of other identity providers. IDP is what they're called, identity providers. Simple. Um, and they should every identity provider should have the ability to do this, right? Even Google, I think, has its own IDP basis, right? Uh, so, what kind of capabilities are used to secure each one of those platforms? Should also have the ability to do each one of these, right? We talked about it already. Not going to dive into it, so you can feel free to read through it, right? And here's all kinds of documentation, right, around Microsoft's methodology. So now that we know that, I'm gonna dive into the quiz, share the results. Let's get it. All right, guys, we just finished the second module's quiz, all about identity concepts. Quick 5 questions, super basic. I didn't really think there was any crazy things that we missed in there. Um, it was fairly straightforward, but I think walking away from this, if you're taking any of the identity concepts, I think what you should learn as we walk through the next 6 or 7 modules is you should start to think about where you would want to niche your career down to once you pass these, right? So once you get through the security basics and concepts and walk through the SC900 itself, I think you should have an understanding where your next maybe 9 to 18 months should be, right? Like if you're coming from maybe a fraud analyst career, if you're coming from any other career field that's not IT related, how can you niche down into a cybersecurity career, right? If you're coming from just maybe a construction or maybe a blue collar career, whatever it may be, wherever you're starting at, this should help you understand where you want to go. Right? And that's my hopeful goal, right, for everybody. Start to understand what you want to do with your career, because IT is a place where every single thing can be the new shiny. There's so much out there, so much different information. It's really important to understand where you want to go, but also take things with a grain of salt, right? Understand that you need to have your patience for yourself. You're learning something brand new. So just having that focus, right? To not look externally, but just to focus for the first 9 to 18 months as you start your career, give you 9 to 18 years of longevity, right? It can give you that growth pattern and really focus. So hopefully you guys are ready for module 3, where we dive into my least favorite subject in IT, which is networking. Absolutely hate it, but it's the most fundamental. It's the most non-negotiable. If you don't have the basics of networking and want to move into any type of engineering role, go back to the beginning. Understand networking. Even if it's at the minutia level, it will set you forth so far. So again, thanks guys for being here. Awesome. Let's jump in module 3. All right, guys. Module 3, networking. One thing I'll tell you right here from the beginning is we're just never going to get through the fundamentals of networking in 3 modules from Microsoft. Not going to happen. But what you can understand in these next 3 sections of this module is the basic, right? Just the concept level basics of certain aspects of networking, right? So let's get into it. Let's understand the networking key concepts in a nutshell. Remember, nutshell. What is IP addressing? What is the OSI model? What is TCP? What is UDP, right? What are port numbers? What's encryption at rest and in transit? All networking fundamentals. That is the basics that we're going to cover, right? So what is an IP address, right? It's a numerical label assigned to every device connected to a computer network that uses the internet protocol for communication. Right? It serves as a unique identifier for devices within the network. Right? So the way I try to describe IP addresses when describing this out in the real world is I say it is your house number, your business number, it is your locational number, right? Like that is an IP address, right? From a routing perspective. What is the OSI model? Open Systems Interconnect model. It's a conceptual framework that standardizes the functions of communication systems in 7 distinct unique layers. Right? So the 7 layers are the physical, the data, the network, the transport, session, presentation, and application layer. 7. Right? Here's a little picture reference, right? And you have 2 layers differences, right? Host layers versus media layers, right? And what is TCP UDP, right? Transmission Control Protocol and User Datagram Protocol, 2 fundamental transport layer protocols used in computer networks that facilitate communications between devices over the internet within a local network. Right? They're responsible for breaking down data into packets for transmission and then reassembling those same packets into the original data on the receiving end. Right? They differ in the use cases. Right? So TCP is connection-oriented protocol that provides reliable and ordered data delivery between devices, right? Think of standard ones that we could think of, right? Web browsing, email, files, and database communication. UDP is a connectionless protocol that offers faster data transmission, but does not provide the same level of reliability as TCP, right? Doesn't establish a formal connection, right? But you can think of it such as things as streaming media, online gaming, and DNS queries, right? DNS all happens at the UDP. Right. What are port numbers? So a port number is a numerical identifier used to differentiate between different services or applications that are running on a single device within a single network. Right. So well-known ports 0 to 1023 reserved for standard services like HTTP to FTP. Registered ports, right, used for application services that are not part of well-known range but are officially registered. Right. Dynamic private ports available for temporary or private use. Was encryption and at rest and in transit, that is a fundamental process now that's defined over a long time, right? And encryption at rest involves encrypting data that's stored on devices, servers, or storage systems, right? So even if an attacker gains physical access to the storage media, they cannot access the data without the encryption keys, right? It's crucial for safeguarding our information. Encryption in transit, right, involves encrypting data as it travels between devices or over networks, right? So preventing of eavesdropping, unauthorized interception of data during transmission, right? So when I send someone a file, right? So send myself a file, send yourself a file, right? Over Outlook, over Gmail, over whatever medium, right? You're sharing that file. That data is guaranteed to be encrypted in the middle, right? So a user or a nefarious actor can't intercept the data in the middle, right? If you want to learn about any of these, right? All these links are below, right? I'm gonna try to provide one giant summary of all these links for the models in the show notes, right? So jump in to level 2, right? So what is networking zero trust, right? So when we talk about the zero trust model as a framework, right? When we talk about all the different pillars, right? The key thing to remember back then was segmentation, right? You want to segment everything, whether it's identity, whether it's networking, right? Whether it's devices, you want to segment, you want to keep them all separated, right? So what is network segmentation, right? We're going to cover that. How does network segmentation help implement zero trust? And what is end-to-end encryption, E to E? All right, so what is network segmentation? It's the practice of dividing a network into smaller, isolated segments or subnetworks, right? So when you hear the term subnet, right, that is a network segmentation, right? Each segment is isolated from others, and access between segments is controlled and restricted based on specific security policies, right? That's how when people say, are you doing a flat network, right? Just one subnet, right? Across one network. Or are you running multiple different subnets, right? A lot of people you'll hear, well, I want to segment my IoT devices, right? My printers, my phones, right? My enterprise devices, right? So print, phone, fax, right? Or media, telco, whatever you do, into separate from my users, right? I don't want my users ever to see these things because these devices may not be up to date as my users. Right? I want to keep that data separate, right? And how does it help implement the zero trust, right? How does network segmentation help? It helps because it aligns closely with principles of zero trust model. Simply, right? Network segmentation matches that zero trust model. We want to segment, right? Um, it helps by enforcing the principle of least privilege, right? Ensuring that users and devices have access to only specific resources and services to perform their tasks, right? It aids by enforcing identity-based access control where users and devices are thoroughly authenticated before authorizing specific segments, right? Think about this, right? And conditional access is a concept in identity, but we can provide network-based controls, right? We can say, hey, we know that this user, right, or Dylan, is on his Windows 10 device at his office network, right, which is in a trusted IP location, right, because the firewall is saying this IP, right? We have all that. That's from the network, right? What is end to end? Again, talk about it a bit. You'll hear this in the field called E to E encryption, right? It's a security measure that ensures that data remains encrypted through the entire journey from sender to recipient. That's the basic, right? High level confidentiality and security for data transmission. Even if the data passes through intermediary systems or networks, is commonly used messaging apps, email services, and other communication platforms to protect sensitive information from interception, right? So when you send an email from Gmail to your work, right? Gmail to Gmail user, all Gmail to Yahoo, that is end-to-end encryption, right? You can guarantee that that data is encrypted from end to end. Right? And what is SASE? Whole another concept, similar to zero trust, right? We get these buzzwords, but SASE is the Secure Access Service Edge. It is a cybersecurity framework and architecture that combines network security and wide area networking, WAN, capabilities into a single cloud-based service. SASE is designed to provide a secure and scalable access to network resources, applications, and data for remote and mobile users, while simplifying network management and reducing complexity of traditional network and security architecture. Key characteristics, right? So why are we covering SASE in a Microsoft Security 101? Because SASE is becoming widely adopted, right? It's everywhere now. You have providers that are now going and saying, if you don't have SASE, we're not buying your firewall, right? Your company's saying, you don't have SASE or one of the other concepts of SASE, we're not buying it, right? So the key is cloud-based, right? SASE is delivered in the cloud. If you don't have cloud, you're not SASE. Fundamental, right? It integrates security and networking, right? So it provides firewall as a service, secure web gateway, DLP, and zero trust network access, right? All to help streamline security and network operations, right? Has zero trust baked in, right? Operates as a principle, right? Identity centric, right? SASE has to have some way to integrate into your device identity, user identity, right? Context based policies to determine access permissions, right? A lot of times you'll see in SASE models and SASE solutions that they're now integrating some VPN component, right? So for virtual private networking, right? Scalability and flexibility, right? Easily accommodate large number of users and devices, making it suitable for organizations with diverse and evolving network and security needs. SASE is here to stay. Right? So here you go. You got a whole bunch of different articles and way to further it. All again, I'll include all of these. Microsoft has its own SASE solution that's coming out. Very excited about it. And it's a lot going on in the market. Super exciting. So let's jump over to module 3, right? Networking security capabilities. All right, a little bit about it, what we're going to learn, right? What are traditional firewalls? What's a web app firewall? Cloud security groups, CDN, what is it? Load balancers, what are they? Bastion hosts, Bastion, one of the coolest services from an old Hyper-V guy, all right? VPN, we just talked about it a bit in section 2. What's a VPN? What is DDoS protection? We talked about that very long ago at the very basics of security, right? Security concepts, DDoS, distributed denial of service. So a traditional firewall is a security device that controls and monitors incoming and outgoing network traffic based on predefined security rules. They act as a barrier between a trusted internal network and untrusted external networks, right? They filter traffic. A lot of the time, the last probably decade, you've seen traditional firewalls start to be integrated on top of routers in products, right? So traditional firewall, that's what they would do. What is a web application firewall? It's a specialized firewall to protect web applications from various attacks such as SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and other web-based vulnerabilities. Right? They analyze HTTP requests and responses to identify and block malicious traffic targeting web applications. Right? What's a security group? Right? A security group is a fundamental network security feature provided by cloud service providers. Right? It's a CSP. Right? They control inbound, outbound traffic to and from cloud resources such as a virtual machine and instances. Right? Allow you to define rules and determine which types of traffic are allowed and denied. Right? Very simple. Does this group of machines have access to this group of resources? Whatever. Right? Security groups exist everywhere, right? Even in Azure, you have network security group as a policy, right? Content delivery network, otherwise known as a CDN, right? It's a distributed network of servers located in various geographical regions, right? CDNs help improve performance and availability of websites by caching content and saving it to the servers that are closest to the user, right? It provides user-based context. They also provide a level of protection against DDoS, right? By distributing that traffic across multiple server locations. So the concept, right? This is something that we'll dive into a lot later in sections in certain areas. But what you will start to see is that in networking and different networking-based services, right, CDNs will also be referred to as POP, point of presence. Because the more points of presence you can get distributed across the globe, the closer you can put your application, your service near to the users actually using it, right? Because that, at the end of the day, we are all driven by time, right? If it takes a long time for a site to load, you're not going to stay on the site. Let's just be real. Right? It allows for optimization. Load balancer, right? Distributes incoming traffic across multiple servers to optimize the resource utilization, right? Ensure high availability and provide application performance, right? So a long time ago, back when we access things on premises, load balancers were extremely important. Right now, it's mainly on the application side that services where we don't even see it as an end user that much anymore, right? A load balance solution. But back in the day, your email was load balanced, right? So we wouldn't have 5,000 people all trying to hit the same email server. We'd have those 5,000 people maybe divided into location-based servers, right? Or load balance servers. Right? What's a bastion host? Highly secure, isolated server that provides controlled access to network from an external, untrusted network, right? So the internet. They're entry points for administrators to access internal systems securely. So think about this, right? Also, back in the day, that same Exchange server, we wouldn't be able to actually administer that Exchange server unless we were on premises where that server is located, or we used remote desktop protocol, and we were in a trusted network. Now, there are bastion hosts, right? So that host is inherently built to be allowed to access these resources, right? But secure. It's usually off the main network, right? We can actually access it, and then it can go into the main network, right? What's a VPN? Talked about this briefly in the last section again. It's created to encrypt tunnels between a user's device and a remote server, ensuring secure and private communication over potentially insecure networks. Right? All of us, and maybe not the newer technology users, right, new to the community, welcome. A VPN is what we used to have to use all the time to access on-premises resources, like a file share, like a printer, like we'll call it even applications, right? Network apps. In order to access them, you needed to be on the VPN. If you weren't on the VPN, you didn't have access. Nowadays, it's more managed devices. You still see VPNs used for things like file shares. Some companies are even using a VPN from providers in their SASE tool to use services like Microsoft 365. Right? It's crazy. VPNs are still out there. They're just sometimes determined different, right? Name changes happen. Get used to it. Welcome to IT. Right, DDoS protection tooling, right, designed to mitigate the impact of a DDoS attack. Simple, right? It ensures that legitimate traffic can still reach its destination. Again, all this reading, enjoy it. Networking, again, not my favorite thing, but we'll be back on the other side of this quiz. Let's see if I can again keep my 100% streak going. See you guys in a second. All right, guys, another end of module quiz, aced. Networking, again, not my favorite thing. There's a question on here. I'll give you a hint. It's about the different layers of something. It almost tricked me. I don't know why, but I just hate networking. So again, we went through module 2 and 3 of the Microsoft Security 101 basics introduction into the security concepts. We've covered identity basics, we've covered networking basics, covered my favorite, my least favorite. I'm super, super excited tomorrow to get back to it and go through modules 4, 5, and 6 on the Security 101 road, right? All going to our SC 900. Let's get it. Let's keep going. If you like the content, be sure to give it a like, a thumbs up, subscribe. The whole playlist is there for you. Let me know what other kind of content you'd like to see.